I guess we allowed enough time for people to join. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aurelia Luca. I'm responsible for operations in Romania and Hungary in Skanska Commercial Development Europe. Today, ABSL's Leaders Talk, the June session, is having a topic which is very close to my heart. It's about sustainability, and it's about building sustainability for future. Before we dive in, some logistics to take care of. During the discussions, if we have questions, just put them in the chat and we will take them as they are posted. Also, you can raise the hand, and then of course you will be given the microphone to share it live. We would like to make it a bit more dynamic as discussion, so feel free to share your thoughts and questions. I will also facilitate today together with Ioana, Richard, and Madalina. And guys, please introduce yourself in a more formal way than I did.
Should I introduce myself, or I let Madalina? Madalina, you go ahead first, please.
Okay, then I will start. Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you today. I'm Madalina Ducan. I am Director for Azure Cloud Services in EMEA, and I'm also the Romanian CNS site leader in Microsoft. And before Microsoft, I've been Chief Operating Officer in a financial services industry, and before that, I've been, let's say, working throughout consultancy, financial services, and different other industry for the last 25 years. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today, not only as a business leader and the Microsoft representative, but also in my personal, let's say, name, because I'm really a big supporter of the sustainability topic, that I believe that at the end of the day, it's our, let's say, a personal accountability to drive forward. And thank you for having me today with you guys.
Welcome, Madalina.
Thank you. So yes, hello, Madalina. Hello, Aura. And hello, Richard. I'm really privileged to discuss with you today about this topic. I have been in the business of responsibility, but from a different perspective. For 10 years, I've been in Interpol, in environmental security program. In 2010, we actually built this program because there was no centralized unit or coordination within the organization to deal with this topic. We put it high on decision makers' agenda in international law enforcement cooperation, and we are all proud of that. Things have evolved from wildlife-related crime and projects towards that to pollution-related, e-waste related, fisheries, forestry, and a lot of other environmentally related projects and environmentally sensitive commodities, let's say. We were very much focusing on Asia and Africa, as well as Latin America, so maybe less on Europe, because Europe has often means to deal with these crimes in a different way. However, from this global perspective on environmental protection, I'm now dealing with corporate social responsibility for Societe Generale Global Solution Centers for India and Romania. And my focus has expanded from environmental protection to include also social aspects and prosperity, as it's a financial institution, even if it's a shared service center for the wider global banking industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ioana. Richard, now your turn.
Thanks, Ioana. Thanks, Madalina. Yeah, my environmental journey maybe started around 10 years ago when I graduated environmental management from University in Glasgow. And through those experiences, you know, it's taught me a lot about the broad sense of sustainability. And I think Ioana touches on a lot of those subjects. It's not just about carbon emissions. There's a whole range of topics that we need to consider: fisheries, agriculture, etc. So I thought that was really interesting. I then moved into Web Help and began what seems like quite a long time ago now as environmental coordinator, and was really responsible for some initiatives like whether it's energy reduction, sustainable travel, etc. But over those years, we've tried to take what were small initiatives and turn them into a bigger strategy. And I think that's what we've seen in recent years is the beginnings and the growth of a real strategy. And that's where I am now at WebHelp. I'm head of property and environment for the UK, and also take a lead role with WebHelp Group on their environmental strategy. And it's fantastic to be here today to have a discussion with you all. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Richard. So before we start the actual discussion, I would like to give us a base for that. And I know climate change is not a new subject, especially lately. There have been a lot of discussions and actions already in the previous years. However, we have seen that in the past year, we have seen an increased attention not only on media, but also more and more companies, they are stating that they are including sustainability very highly on their agenda, and also putting a lot of focus on actions. So what really changed this dynamic lately? Maybe the pandemic that made us more aware of the responsibility that we have towards each other and also for the community and the environment. We have also seen that based on our experience, we have seen areas where we have identified areas where we can positively impact our communities that we are operate. By promoting community investment and diversity and inclusion and being an ethical role model, pushing forward the industry safety standards, and also providing climate smart solutions to cut on carbon footprint. So, as representatives of the business services industry, what is the actions that you started to have building on the significant impact that I was mentioning before? What are the steps that you have done in Romania?
I think if I could just go back to one of your previous points at the beginning there was around, yes, climate change has been a topic for some time, but yes, it has come to the forefront. And why has that happened? And I think there's a couple of reasons why it's more prominent now. And we think about the Paris Agreement in 2015. I think that was really a turning point for the world to stand up and take notice, because at that point, there was some very distinctive goals and targets put on it. So leading economies to be net zero by 2050. We have to keep global warming well below 2 degrees. And I think at that point, it made it a lot easier for people, businesses, governments, individuals to really understand what we were trying to achieve. Whereas before, it was quite an abstract thought. So I think that was really one of the key turning points, and now we've all got something to focus on.
It was more reactive before, so now we see it's a more proactive. This is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Clear.
So building maybe on that, or because the element, the pandemic element, I think it's worthwhile highlighting, because really, certainly that we are a bit more sensitive to health-related aspects, because we all had time to reflect. We slowed down. We kind of started to see things in perspective. We acknowledge that life matters, and not just Black Lives Matter, but life matters. And responsibility has become a new norm, I believe, and it's here to stay. Sure, it takes time from awareness to go through acknowledgement, to believe that you need this, to embed responsibility in your life, and the third level, to adjust, to have a responsible attitude towards yourself and towards your stakeholders. So, but what is responsibility? Let me just mention in the context of the pandemic as well. It's about staying sane and staying alive, staying sane through our meaningful social relationships, with our family members, with our work peers, colleagues, which we haven't seen, and staying alive in our natural environment, no? Because let's remember how we felt during this real lockdown that we've all experienced in our homes. I mean, those with a garden were privileged, but anybody else just wanted to escape and to live for the rest of their lives in a forest. And yeah, that's important. And responsibility, I like to think it in terms of taking life-enhancing pills so that we don't end up in needing life-supporting medicines, really. Because you have to notice the difference between life-enhancing and life-supporting. So when you see an ambulance, and we've seen ambulances a lot this period of time, we naturally think, well, how fortunate that it's not me. The problem with climate change and with responsibility and with what we are doing now is that we're actually going towards being in that ambulance together. That's the problem. So it's really making us realize that the path that we have been taken and that we are on since these past decades, it's really not the one to continue to take forward. And let me just conclude, because just yesterday in the news from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we've received the N100 advertisement saying that, or highlighting the effect of increasing temperatures that generate already extreme weather conditions and which will become more and more disrupting. Okay, and they go on by saying that life on Earth, as we know it, will be completely or irreversibly negatively affected by the time our children born this year will turn 30. So our children at our age will suffer because of us. And that's something that we should not allow to happen. We really need to start changing our mindset, changing our habits, and start to think in terms of what can I do to prevent that from happening.
If I may be allowed, because it's Ioana had an incredible, let's say, talent to build this sense of urgency for us, and thank you, Ioana, for bringing this, let's say, attention point into the conversation, because in the end of the day, it is an attention point for all of us. I mean, sustainability, it's not a new topic. I mean, let's be honest, as the scientific community has concluded, the human activity has released more than 2 trillion metric tons of the greenhouse gases into Earth's atmosphere since the start of the first industrial revolution into the mid 1700. And over 3/4 of this is carbon dioxide, which is probably most being emitted since the 1950s or so. Of course, the attention point that you created, it relates much more to the actual period. However, this is more than carbon than nature can reabsorb ever. And therefore, every year, the humanity pumps more than 50 billion metric tons of additional greenhouse gases into the air. This is not a problem that lasts in the few years or even a few decades. Once this excess carbon enters into the atmosphere, it will take thousands of years to dissipate. And therefore, every, let's say, experts probably will agree in the world that takes this urgent action to bring down emissions. And ultimately, yes, we might reach this net zero emissions, meaning that humanity must remove as much carbon as it emits this every year, basically. And I liked very much your metaphor of being locked down into our houses. The reality is that we are all as a humanity, let's say, perspective, being locked down in our planet house. And therefore, considering, let's say, the massive impact that we created as a species, let's say, in all over the planet, this probably will take aggressive approaches from our side to repair the damage that it was done, and also to try to save the planet going forward. And therefore, we must apply new technologies that does not exist today, and innovate public policy. It will take, of course, ambitious goals, but science is telling us that this goal of fundamental importance is also enabled by every person that lives today and for every generation to follow, because otherwise it's impossible not only to recuperate what we have damaged in the past years, but also to make up, let's say, the race that we are heading ourselves against as a human kind, let's say.
Yeah. I think just, a final point from me on that is, I think we all agree of the urgency is needed, but what I think the pandemic has shown us is that change is possible. So we have reduced our emissions, and I think as an individual and as an organisation and as a government, we have to tackle this optimistically. We can't just sit back and criticise and be negative about the problem. We have to think forward and be energetic and bring people on the journey. And I think that's how we're going to get to where we need to go to.
But maybe it was an interesting, let's say, discussion to refer much more specifically to this turning point that Aurelia mentioned, because over the last years, probably every company has focused on this sustainability discussion. And I can provide, let's say, the example of Microsoft. Yes, we did focus a lot on the sustainability for more than a decade, and we are, of course, proud of our achievements. As company-wide, our commitment was to become carbon neutral, and probably like most carbon neutral companies, Microsoft have achieved this neutrality largely by investing in offsets that primarily, let's say, avoid emissions instead of removing carbon that was already emitted. However, as a turning point, as Aurelia mentioned, the 2020 was indeed a very, let's say, high profile attention point for us. And therefore, we realized that being carbon neutral is not longer enough. And looking, let's say, fast forward, we must move to net zero carbon and ultimately become carbon negative. And this is why probably as a company, we are shifting our focus in order to recuperate and also to accelerate this goal moving forward.
Obviously, some industries, they have a bigger impact on the environment, or more obvious one. And coming from a construction company, I can say that construction is actually the one that has one of the biggest impact on environment. And of course, our strategy and our road to become carbon neutral by 2045, it has started some way back in '97, of course, having an accident that caused a huge damage in the area. And that was the tipping point or the turning point for our company to really, really pay attention to this, make it high on our agenda. Is one of our values right now. So my next questions for you would be, what was the tipping point for your companies when you decided to take this really high up and start working in this direction?
If I can potentially start, because you've mentioned the construction industry, and I'll share a little secret from my previous experience with Interpol. When we were in the process of building, when the organization was building a new like a second kind of headquarters in Singapore, I asked our colleagues, because it started in 2012-13, but I did ask our colleagues who were dealing with this project, I said, has there been an impact assessment on this project? And they were like, excuse me, what is that? To understand the nuisance, or the impact you would have from an environmental perspective, the community there. But I'm sure, and not I'm sure, I know for sure that the project actually developed nicely. But at the beginning, things start somewhere, of course. And for a shared service center, every human economic activity has some kind of impact on social or environmental dimensions. No, and I think you have to think of it in terms of a continuum of activities for any service or any product, because whatever I buy, it's the sum of so many other things that are happening behind the scenes, So at each part of this continuum, at each level, at each supply chain, there can be an impact that we should review and mitigate, or turn it into a positive one. And specifically for shared service centers, which we are not as close to the banking system, and we are not client-facing people to really feel how the money is circulating. We do services that support the wider global banking system. But everything starts with the purpose. So really, there is no value in your work if you don't understand your higher purpose. We are passionate beings, humans are. We feed off sentiments, including at work. So we really had to come up and find this purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? Anything, our HR, our IT support, what? So we came up with this statement that the Global Solution Center India and Romania, Societe Generale, contribute to securing a healthy functioning of the global economy nervous system, which is banking and financial systems in the end. No? So we do this through all essential services that we offer, specialized IT support and HR, I've mentioned learning factories, financial services to the group, research, transitions, really much more. So if our services are performant and created with good energy and with diversity, with teams who are diverse to understand also what how the clients are, our client base is diverse. So we will really be in a position to increase the group's ability to do relationship banking, assisting their clients through good times and bad, really. And these clients in the end are all of us, our relatives, our friends here and abroad. And that's the beauty of global companies, because whatever I do here now today, it's helping a family somewhere else in the world. And this is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ioana, for sharing this insight. Richard, maybe can you also share what was the turning point for Web Health?
Yeah, of course. So I think, again, I don't think there was one key tipping point for Web Help. I think we've been on a journey, so it's more of evolution than some kind of revolution. I think Web Help's such a huge global business now with over 60,000 employees across around 70 countries that there has always been a sustainability agenda and some fantastic work, whether that's in in Romania. I know that we've been monitoring and measuring our energy consumption and emissions for some time and putting in initiatives to do that. But then we had initiatives in the UK and in France. And I think what we've managed to do in the last couple of years is kind of centralize that some way and bring it into a much broader strategy. And I think the best thing about that is, we have to, Ioana, we're talking about human beings here. We've all got passions and we want to share best practice. And so now that we have, I'm in the UK working with Romania working with France, we're all sharing those efficiencies. And I think that's been the biggest change for Web Help. But, we're our strapline, think human, is very much at the front and centre of our culture. And I think what we realised is that an energy or a sustainability strategy without involving our people there's no point to that. You have to bring your people on the journey as well. And it's how does our environmental strategy improve the lives of our own people, whether that's the working environment, their home environment, how they travel, their culture, they're proud to be working for Web Help. So I think it's joining all the dots is what we're doing now.
Clear. Thank you very much, Richard, for sharing. Madalina, maybe would you like also to add how Microsoft started this journey?
As I said, the journey started decades ago, and we might, after achieving this, let's say, carbon neutrality, we consider that it's not enough. And therefore, yes, we might say that 2020 was a turning point when the group CEO announced that we are going to have even a stronger commitment towards environmental sustainability. And it's not only by offering this impact into the reactive or into the, let's say, protecting part, but also investing proactively into the impact that will help the future of the planet. And therefore, there was an announcement of $1 billion climate innovation fund investment, and I will talk a bit later about what does it mean more precisely. And of course, in terms of strategy, we had 4 directions in which the sustainability will be taken care of: carbon, water, waste, and ecosystem. And I would like to spend a bit of let's say seconds in each of this direction. Carbon, first of all, of course, the intention is to become carbon negative by 2030, and therefore remove from the environment the equivalent of all the carbon that the company has emitted since its founding. And this will happen again by 2050. And therefore, we already started to reduce the footprint that we are producing and investing in this removal, but also making new partnership to accelerate the decarbonization everywhere through the supply chain, to our partnership that we are creating, and so on. So it's more into the ecosystem that Microsoft it's creating and it's enabling. Also, in terms of water, setting the roadmap to become water positive by 2030, and taking this responsibility for our own water use, but also to increase replenishment, develop technology to help others to do the same. So again, making this environment impact. In terms of waste, this reducing part of or becoming zero waste across the direct footprint by 2030, which is quite of an ambitious goal, and therefore improving packaging while launching new products, new approaches like surplus centers, for example, and accelerating progress to technology, because of course technology is our most let's say important enablers. And I would like also to mention the ecosystem part that Microsoft is providing the impact, because we are now working to protect more land than we use. And we are building a planetary computer with more than 10 petabytes of environmental data that is now available. And this planetary computer will provide access to critical environmental databases, data assets, and artificial intelligence. So again, it's something that will create a forward-looking impact into this sustainability race.
Maybe a comment based on Madalina's input, Aura, if I may.
Please, please.
So definitely Microsoft is a progressive company. You have a mentor instead of a CEO. We do follow what he's saying. I mean, it's the energy and really his level of knowledge and his willing and openness to support of all of these challenges in comparison with other very rich people. It's really great. And it's strategic for companies such as Microsoft, but even for companies such as the Shared Service Center for Societe Generale, because now everything is done on internet and with the laptop, and that's how we work. And I think the tipping point is knowledge. We are in the business of data science and knowledge and information. So we now know that if internet would be a country, it would be the 4th largest CO2 emitter in the world. Are we doing something about it? Yes. And also to link it to what Richard was mentioning, involving people. What are we without our people? What are these companies without the knowledge, the good work, the inspiration, the commitment of our people? So it's like we understand what's happening. We put in place strategies to do something about it, and our people should and are leading this. It's not confined to one office responsibility. It's everything we do through all our services.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a good point to refer a bit to the options that we can create this impact that we are all vehiculated. Yes, we can create impact by our employees, which of course we all recognize that our employees are the biggest assets in advancing innovation. Therefore, creating opportunities for them to enable themselves to contribute to these sustainability efforts, it's one important avenue. Using our company voices on all the carbon-related public policy issues, because in the end of the day, we have this let's say, social responsibility as a company. And therefore, supporting new public policies, initiatives, and accelerate these reduction and removal opportunities will always be very important to stand up from our companies. Ensuring effective transparency. I also believe that this is one of our important, let's say, trait as important players in our markets. Publishing annual environmental sustainability reports, provide transparency, and let's say make sure that we clearly communicate our company's progress. This is a strong asset that we can create this mimetism and therefore to create followers for the rest of the companies to come along in this journey.
Yeah.
Also empowering our customers around the world. Probably most importantly is that, I mean, I'm talking now about Microsoft, that we are developing and deploying digital technologies that will help our suppliers and customers to reduce their carbon footprint. So also being some sort of an indirect, let's say, players here. Of course, investing in technologies that are going to do this much more accelerated over the future years. And of course, taking responsibility for our own carbon footprint. So this is really important image and really important, let's say, results that we can create and being transparent about as companies.
Thank you so much for sharing all these insights, because maybe at the beginning was not so clear how the business service industry can have an impact, but I believe through all that you have shared is now clearly not only the impact, but also the immense actions that are working to achieving that goal. And also, I think we touched very well the opportunities that are raising. And the biggest one is actually mentioned by Ioana at the beginning, that yes, we have this responsibility for our children, not only for us today, now, but also for the future. And I would like now maybe to take the discussion to a bit more concrete points when it comes to very specific targets and how do you intend to achieve them. As I was mentioning before, we are as part of the construction sector, which counts for about 40% of the global energy carbon emissions. Our long-term target is to be carbon neutral by 2024. Of course, we are also supportive of Paris Agreement, and we are also signatory of United Nations Global Impact since 2001. So, but I would like to hear also from you specifically, what are your targets and how do you plan to achieve them for at least this year?
Yeah, I don't mind going first. So I think, you know, there's a whole range of businesses that are either on this call or operate in Romania, and every business is going to have a different budget or capacity to make change. But I think the fundamentals should stay the same for every business. And the first thing is to understand what their impact is. So regardless of whether you're Webhelp, Microsoft, or a small organization, you know, you have to review what are your emissions, what is your impact. And the first thing I always ask people to do is to measure their impact, because you can't manage something if you don't measure it first. So, you know, and we have done that at Webhelp, you know, so on our journey, the first thing was to measure. And then once we've understood what that is, we need to understand where are we trying to get to, you know, so by 2050, you know, we have to be contributing to helping the planet stay under 2 degrees. We understand that Webhelp cannot do this on their own. You know, we cannot save the world. We have to be realistic, you know, but we want to contribute our part. And for us at the moment, that's looking like a 4.3% reduction on carbon emissions year on year until 2050. And then what we have to do is obviously commit to that, but then start to take actions. So what is the roadmap? What of your review and your emissions, what can you actually do to reduce them? And each business will be different. So whether it's concrete in the construction, switching to a greener concrete, whether it's travel, switching to a greener fuel, whether it's businesses empowering their colleagues to commute differently. Because at Webhelp, one of our biggest emission sources, in fact, the vast majority is the fuel used in commuting. So we have to empower our colleagues to make more sustainable choices. But then once we do that, you have to review all the time. You know, and again, it's advice to other businesses that year on year, you have to review what the actions are and are they making a difference. So yeah, Webhelp very much want to play their part in reducing carbon emissions and keeping global temperatures under 2 degrees by 2050.
Thank you so much for that. Ioana or Madalina, if you would like to take over.
Madalina, go ahead if you want. Can be the last.
Okay, as you said. So I've already shared this this ambition that we have stated, and yes, I can revise them again. So in terms of carbon, the intention is to become carbon negative by 2030 and remove the environmental equivalent of all the carbon that has been emitted by Microsoft since its founding by 2050. In terms of water, as I've mentioned, the target is to become water positive by 2030. And in terms of waste, the intention is to become zero waste across the direct footprint that Microsoft has created by 2030. And just to be a bit more specific for the results and let's say the transparency of the reporting within the last year, looking back, what I would like to just to provide a couple of examples in terms of data. First of all, we have created an internal carbon tax fee that's set to $15 per metric ton. And this carbon tax, it's not a shadow tax like some other companies can come, but it's calculated and it's charged. Basically, this fee is paid by each division in our business based on the business, let's say, carbon emissions. And these funds are used to pay the sustainability improvements. Also, this, let's say, sustainability report that it's available in the market shows the progress and the challenges, and this is reviewed by a third party. And just to go through some data that were published, looking back into the 2020 data, in terms of carbon, we have already procured 1.3 million metric tons of carbon removal during the last year. And our top suppliers reduced their collective footprint by 21 metric tons of carbon. In terms of water, we have, Microsoft have contributed with an investment of 10 million in this Emerald Technology Ventures Global Water Impact Fund that is supporting innovative technology for water conservation, access, and quality. And it's launching water accessibility work to more than 1.5 million people, providing safe drinking water and sanitation access. The gap that was, let's say, closed in terms of waste versus the target in 2020 was by diverted over 60K metric tons from landfills. And of course, the dearest, let's say, part to me being an Asia representative, it's into the ecosystem part, because we onboarded 10 petabytes of environmental and Earth observation data to Azure, that it's now freely available for the conservation community to use, because ultimately what we have learned in the past year is that knowledge it's power, and we all have so much to keep learning. And during the next 3 decades, probably we will need technology breakouts on a par with those that propelled humanity to the moon a half century ago. And therefore, we consider that this will require investment and collaboration for most of the players within the markets to be able to go there.
Well, quite ambitious, I can say. Richard, you want to add something, or?
No.
Well, then you wanna let's
Thank
hear.
you. I did a trick. I wanted to go after Madalina, and I'll tell you why, because it's important for the process of CO2 emissions. But just to say, I think that Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken, you've appointed at the group level, Microsoft headquarters level, the first sustainability chief, Lucas Iopa. So I think, we are all acute and interested about developments in businesses such as Microsoft, because we all use your services. And now it's important, why it's important to mention that in this specific question. Societe Generale and other several banks have just recently, as April, a couple of months ago, we've just signed the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which commits us to be carbon neutral by 2050. Not 2030 as Microsoft, but still ambitious enough. But it's something, it's important to be said here. Because for the CO2 emissions, we think in terms of scope. Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. Scope 1 is your own direct emissions and owned, your location, your own cars and all that. Scope 2 is your emissions that are indirect, so the electricity that you purchase, for example. And Scope 3, that's where the big or the holy grail of the CO2 accounting is coming into picture. And it actually shows the interdependency between companies such as Microsoft, Webhelp, Societe Generale, and all these ecosystem, because it is about the CO2 emissions from upstream, so the services that you purchase or products, and downstream services or products, which are also the investments you make. And for banks, it's very important to focus on Scope 3 and really have a clear accounting and visibility and monitoring of these emissions. So, but beside the Net Zero Banking Alliance by 2050, Societe Generale has further made commitments for climate change. From a responsible banking perspective, 120 billion allocated for energy transition between 2019 and 2023. So that's an important commitment. We also have committed to coal exit by 2030 in OECD area, and by 2040 the rest of the world. And yes, Russia is a big player, so it needs a bit more time to adjust to sustainability worldwide. We also have Poseidon principles for the shipping center and their energy transition based on the International Maritime Organization's objective to reduce by 50% to 2050 the emissions of the vessels worldwide. So for a bank, this is about giving more money to companies that are either having less CO2 emissions or having plans in that regard. And sustainable IT charter. And again, this is something very much related to our colleagues' focus. Sustainable IT, what is sustainable IT? Well, green coding. Just start to write code that puts less pressure on the energy that an application is consuming. As simple as that, but it's important. There are some specific guidelines to be able to write those type of applications that are a bit more responsible in that sense. Or e-accessibility, that's also part of sustainability aspect. So let's not forget that this will be made possible if we also focus on social innovation and being responsible employers, because you've seen, probably all of us, we've noticed this mercantilism that's happening this period where without the company culture and connection with our teams, we go to the highest bidder. Really, are we going to follow this model and be just like robots behind the computer doing for something, putting our efforts and tears and sweat into whoever gives more? Maybe not. Maybe we should compete in terms of how sustainable our companies are, and for employees to make their decisions, especially based on that, because generally salaries become a hygiene factor. But just to mention quickly what we've done. We've moved in a Skanska building. It's important for us because in Campus 6 where we are, it's a pre-certified LEED building, gold level, so very much important for us in terms of sustainability. We've looked at eco-office, no single-use plastics, management of e-waste, towards a paperless office, so less printing. Why do we use printing? Okay, regulatory needs. Let's just help through our citizenship and mentoring and volunteering our authorities to become more digitalized. We have this power. We are Romanians working for international companies. Let's just help our government as well to do this faster. Furniture reuse, or purchasing furniture that has been converted or recycled from old furniture. Hybrid fleet of cars, and in India we started also to buy electric cars. Desktop to laptop and dual to single monitor conversion. Storage and server decommissioning, and other specific IT analysis for applications. So let's not forget about the social aspect and the governance aspect, which really, but I won't go into details now. Maybe we'll have more time.
Yes, because we have seen all the great stuff, and also hearing how ambitious the targets are, and it really makes me proud of that. But we have also heard how many great things are we doing, but what about the supply chain? Do you have a demand when it comes to your suppliers in terms of sustainability?
Madalena,
I think,
Richard, go.
yeah, of course. You know, as you know, businesses develop their own sustainable agenda, our suppliers will need to develop theirs as well. So typically, you know, we look for partners that are aligned in terms of certification, whether that's ISO 14001, 50001, etc. But it all depends on what your business is procuring. So, you know, in WebHelp, telco is a large procurement item for WebHelp, and we're working with our suppliers to reduce their carbon intensity of their products year on year. And we're just about to launch our own supplier sustainability program, where we will set out very key objectives for each supplier, and that they will need to adhere to them before we can do business with them. And whether that's, you know, even the energy that we procure. So, you know, at the minute, you know, we don't have in all sites 100% renewable energy in the supply chain, but we will look to only buy 100% green energy from people. But the key thing for us is actually not what we buy, but is how much of it we buy. And I think as a culture, you know, we, as individuals or businesses, we look to buy more than what we probably need. And we should be, if you think about the waste hierarchy, you know, use less, I think is up there first, and we should all be looking to do that. But certainly, yes, going forward from now until 2050, we're not looking for suppliers, we're looking for partners that share.
Clear. Madalena, maybe you can continue on this.
I like very much and I would like to build on Richard's thought here. I would not like to discuss about suppliers, but rather partnership, and creating this enablement from each of us to work together as an ecosystem. And therefore, it's inevitable that we will all align to this sustainability discussion. So I would rather like to look at not a selection type of conversation, but rather as a support and an enabling type of conversation with our partners. And direct or indirect, this type of giver and receiver energy that it's creating between our companies will always, let's say, go towards a common goal. And it's also the good example that you want to provide. I can provide the example with the Skanska partnership. In Campus 6 was one of, let's say, beautiful point that is creating this kind of moving forward partnership into the sustainability journey that will enable at the end of during this journey also the other partners that will jump into the ecosystem, like the electricity, let's say the green part of it, let's say the water, coffee, and so on. So everything that will come into this ecosystem that we created with Campus 6 will have to align to the standards that both of us we have created. And basically, this is why I'm saying that I would like to look as an enabling type of a conversation, or as enabling type of a journey with our partners, rather than let's say a forced conversation.
Demand. Yeah.
Yes, because we have these standards, the lead standards and the well-building standards. Just to look at this particular example with the new building that we are moving on, and therefore everything that has to do with environment, impact on human health, well-being, air, water, nourishment, as I said, light, fitness, comfort, mindset, everything will be aligned towards these standards, and will enter into this ecosystem with the sustainability conversation to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, clearly we have put our best, because each project for us means raising the bar when it comes to not only impact on sustainability, but also communities around. So we are also trying to offer something in return. But thinking also about the culture, and it's one thing to have a corporate strategy with all that comes with it, And the other thing is the culture, and how do we involve our employees in our sustainability agenda, in our objectives? Because ultimately, it's not only the company, but it boils down to each and every one of us. So how do we motivate them? How do we cultivate the right mindset in our colleagues, just to take it further?
Aura, if I can just rebound on the previous question, so I have a short answer for it, and we'll come back to how we involve our employees. Just to mention that we are children. Yeah, we are when we are born, we are dependent. We need the support of our parents. We become independent after that. We don't want anybody else's support. We are fine on our own. Okay, which is not always safe in that sense, like when we are teenagers or really young and crazy and passionate. But the most important moment in our lives is when we are becoming and recognizing interdependencies, and the fact that we are interdependent, and there is no need to be independent, because at any point in time you will have to have or interact with the people around you, regardless from what the dimension, area. But what's important to understand in business relationships and partnerships is that we are human. Greed has been a determining factor in business. Only 1950 we have started that we need to cool off with this greed, because it's killing quality, killing relationships, killing livelihoods of other people. So we are now understanding the level of interdependency that we have, and the responsibility we have towards each other, to support each other and to police each other. And that's how we are in supply chains. I'm taking something, I'm a client, I have some expectations that you will have at least the same standards of responsibility in terms of human rights, in terms of environmental protection and governance measures that you have in place, so that we are partners. Because reputational risk is the biggest thing now. You've seen operational risk, we go over quickly because we are all resilient from that perspective. But reputational risk, once you go on that rabbit hole, then it's very difficult to come out of it. So it's really important to mention that. Due diligence, know your partner, know your customer, all these things are essential. It's about trust. Once you identify that, okay, we have the same things, we want the same things, we have the same values, then we can enter in a partnership and all of us can benefit. And never forget, win-lose situations are not good for business. Win-win or no deal at all. That's fine too. Okay, so employees and the culture that we are creating. Yes, first of all, if I think about it, we have to create unique experiences for our employees. Otherwise, as I was mentioning before, they leave, and it's okay, they leave, but not only because of that, but because we spend our lives, our youth with each other. If we don't have those experiences, fun, interaction, like meaningful interactions with our peers, with our managers, with the people who we are supporting to grow, then our lives is void of any purpose. Okay, so that's important. And another important aspect that should be, and I want to highlight here, managers are actually working in the services of their people, not the other way around. And I know that in Romania we have this problem of thinking, I'm the boss, you do what I say. Actually, the people that you work with and they're in your team, you work for them and nobody else, because they are the specialists, they are the people who are implementing things, they are the operational and the people who know their business well, so they need my support further in interactions, or my support in any kind of topic. So yes, citizenship, sponsorship, but involving them, engaging them, and making them feel like they're sharing their skills. And Romania is a very skillful work environment, only that they are leaving Romania. So let's keep them here. I've returned after 10 years. We love Romania. Let's make it worthwhile staying.
Thank you so much for this insight. Madalena or Richard, if you want to take over, and after that we will also reply to one question that we received on the chat.
The only thing I would add to that, and it's more of a learning experience from a mistake that I made in my early career, was we focused solely on energy reduction, and that was a huge benefit. In some regions we reduced our energy consumption by 40%. Fantastic, but nobody really cared. In the business it wasn't exciting. We didn't sell it to them, so it was almost a wasted opportunity. And what we've done now is almost, when we're communicating with our people, is what benefit is it to them? Why are they interested in it? And we run quite a lot of internal workshops at the moment on how people can save energy at home, or how they can save food at home. And we find that if you encourage good behaviours in their own personal life, they tend to bring those good behaviours into the office. So it can't always just be kind of hard-hitting energy reduction. There has to be some fun in there as well. People like to have fun. So at WebHelp we have over 500,000 bees that produce our own honey. We give that honey out to our people, and that engages people. So then when we talk about honey workshops, carbon emissions, people start to see it's all part of the one journey. And I think that helps with the culture, to your point earlier.
Thank you, Richard. Madalena, you want to add something?
Yeah, in the end, I would like to extract a couple of thoughts here from Ioana and Richard. In the end of the day, yes, employees are the biggest assets that every company has. And purely by enabling them 100% to take the right choices and the right decisions, it's creating the culture. Because culture, it's not a fact. Every single one of the persons that work within a company creates this culture. And in the end of the day, this enabling, or let's say fully empowering our colleagues to do the right thing, will create the culture of sustainability around. Because sustainability starts from our daily operations. If we promote durable, let's say provide the right reusable options, composting our sites, we are able to change the way that we interact with each other, but also we build such an environment that help our colleagues, I mean the employees, to consider more sustainable choices throughout the workday. And I don't know, reducing plastic, reducing waste, moving to very high quality standards water fountains, for example, or enabling, let's say, the location that the workplace that the employees are doing their job in let's say work from the office environment and not work from home, I'm talking right now, will of course embrace much more easy the change for each of our colleagues. And just to provide an example, within the new premise, using 100% compostable and biodegradable, let's say, cups for coffee machines, water dispenser, bioplastic PLA cutlery. This basically means to break down the waste and help environment through the use of less plastic. And this is mimetism. So enabling them to take the right choices will encourage them to embrace the idea that being sustainable really makes sense. And these behavioral changes should be seen from a positive and a welcomed perspective. Also, we proudly created this Microsoft Forest, let's say, example over the past years. Planting trees was something that was created throughout the years as a culture. It's called, with a partnership of an NGO that is called Plantăm Fapte Bune. We have planted more than 1,500 trees somewhere in Bălceanu area in Buzău. And each planted tree, it's a symbol for every, let's say, employee in Microsoft Romania to build a Microsoft Forest, but also to put their, let's say, footprint on the help of the planet. And therefore it's some sort of a metaphoric step forward and pledging this, let's say, creating together type of culture to ensure a safer and much more healthier and much more sustainable future, not only for us, but also for our children. So this is literally planting good seeds with our, let's say, colleagues to represent the community, and therefore to show this daily example of care and being passionate about making a difference that is creating a sustainable culture. So it takes to every single individual to create this sustainable culture, as you mentioned, Aurelia.
Absolutely. And now I see we actually have 4 questions. I didn't see the ones in the question and answer. So let us take the first one on the chat. Did the 2019 Business Roundtable shift on the purpose of corporation from the shareholders to stakeholders influence your company's journey for sustainability? I hope this is clear, but pretty much if there is a shift between shareholders to stakeholders.
Who should go?
Ioana, you can the first.
Sure. Well, this shift is actually an intrinsic rule and principle for corporate social responsibility. Inclusion, it's not only about the people who are making the money off of the business, it's about also the people working for that company that are taking their livelihoods from that, from the company. It's also about the communities, or either vulnerable or nearby communities that we impact. It's about clients, it's about authorities, and our support to them. This is definitely a shift in mindset. Stakeholders, when you say shareholders, especially in the banking sector, it has started to have a negative connotation. So, you know, the shareholders. Yeah, but it's not just about them, and it's they are also realizing, and they are starting to have a shift in their mindset, as they would want their investment or their money or their businesses to be both profitable as well as sustainable. And it's possible. It's the only issue is that you may have to have an investment at the beginning in revising the strategy, in having processes in place, in reassessing your impact across and having your materiality analysis to see where your impacts are, to see who your stakeholders are, to ensure that you have a robust strategy in place for CSR. So we have to go through all these processes. It may be costly at the beginning, but in time, in 3 to 5 years, everybody will be more happier. And that mental well-being of all the parties involved, it has enormous effect on the business, on that specific industry sector and economy at large. So very much starting to gear towards stakeholders, because I care about what everybody says, not about only what shareholders are saying or what top leadership is saying. I need to know what people want. It's a negotiation. It's not a done deal anymore. We are in a period of extreme transparency, trust building, and support of each other. We have to start to support each other. That's key in this business.
Clear. Richard, Madalina, you would like to add something on this question?
Basically, it's just build up on the conversation that we had a few minutes ago. This partnership ecosystem, it's putting a peer pressure on everyone. Every business player, every, let's say, person or every individual. And therefore, only to this peer pressure and arm's length, let's say, contribution to this ecosystem, we will be getting alone, let's say, with this attention point from sustainability perspective. And therefore, yes, it's quite an inevitable change. So moving to the stakeholder influence, it's this kind of peer pressure that we are creating within the ecosystem as purely partners here.
Thank you, Madalina. Richard, you want to add?
Yeah, just a quick point that, you know, we talked about opportunities of sustainability earlier, and whether you're a shareholder or a stakeholder, you recognise what those opportunities can bring to the business. So I think shareholders also recognise how important sustainability is, whether that's for attracting and retaining the right talent, whether that's reducing costs, whether that's attracting new clients, you know. So I think everyone is aware of how important it is now.
Clear. Well, I will jump to the next question. Do your companies measure Scope 3 emissions? And if so, what CO2 emissions do you measure from Scope 3? Maybe Richard, you want to continue?
Yeah, of course. So yes, you know, we are very much committed to science-based targets set out by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So we obviously include Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Now, you know, we touched on it earlier that Scope 3 is actually probably the most difficult scope to measure. You know, it's very difficult to understand what is happening upstream and downstream. For Webhelp, you know, our biggest Scope 3 emissions is our commuting, how people get to work, and that is what we measure. But the other elements in that is, you know, what our purchases are, you know, what our services are. And as much as it's difficult to measure, you can have a huge impact relatively quickly. And some of if we think about concrete decisions that we could make to impact Scope 3, so if we choose a location, you know, we're talking about headquarters earlier in Singapore, for example, if that's out of town and people are forced to drive to it, then that is a poor business decision, which would impact your Scope 3 emissions. Whereas if we choose a city centre location with electric car, vehicle charging, bike, metro, train, that is a much better decision. So although that Scope 3 is very difficult, I wouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that it's not something that we can influence, because it is. So yes, we do very much measure it, and we plan to tackle it.
Madalena, would you like to add something on this? Then
Sure. Madalena, should I
Go
or
ahead.
should you?
Go ahead, Johan.
So with this CO2 emission measurement and benchmarking and identifying where you are and baselining, and there is a trick to it, because we cannot be in the business of accurate monitoring of CO2. Not yet. It's a science that's currently being evolving. And more so, it has not yet been a regulatory requirement to report on Scope 3 emissions. Again, because probably the methodologies of like official internationally agreed methodologies have not yet been set or defined. We do look at our investments and our portfolio of banking portfolio, because we are a reflection of our clients. So, you know, yeah. That for us, it's essential to become more or to have more control of the Scope 3 and more visibility. But there are rating agencies for solicited and unsolicited rating who are asking us or assessing us, our business, Societe Generale, like global group present in 61 countries. So more and more there is this practice of looking at what the bank's Scope 3 is, again, without yet having regulatory normative framework that we could like follow just like that easily. We are also monitoring and supporting and increasing the green bonds and green investments and all these green products and services that the banks are looking into or building. And what we have started to do, and it's building also internally and also with external partners, we are looking at the proof of concept with a startup called Plan A Earth. So if you are interested in, Madalena is smiling, you've heard about it most probably. Okay, they are a startup. I really like them because there is so much energy and so much enthusiasm about those people who have really focused on climate science until now, and they would know the type of CO2 formulas that you have to introduce. They would have benchmarks for different countries. They would also start to look at Scope 3 as well. They have recommendation engines, and they also have a portfolio of projects that you can choose from and start to do this carbon neutrality thing. So they are small now, but I don't mind in supporting them or increasing their visibility, because if I don't know how the POC will come out, whether it will be positive or whether we'll enter in a relationship or not with them. But in any case, this is the type of steps that we are taking, we are looking at, and our leadership is more and more comfortable into sharing all these things, because that's where we are heading towards, and it's normal. This transparency will inspire further trust, and that's where we are.
Thank you, Ioana. Madalina, would you like to add something?
Just to complete a bit the angle here, because in the end of the day, it's really important what each small detail count. And yes, we do measure. All this data are, let's say, audited or reviewed by third parties. So this is, let's say, public data available. And of course, like every new and complex social issue, we strive first to learn, and then to define the principal approach to guide our efforts. And this has been probably fundamental into this, let's say, work of measuring the sustainability, mostly around the protection and the privacy. And therefore, the ethical development of all the artificial intelligence that would help this, let's say, measurement, and the approach that we are taking to pursue these aggressive carbon goals that every company probably will strive to do. And of course, there are a set of, I believe, 7 principles behind, or elements, and one of them is grounding in science and math. And therefore, grounding our work and the ability to measure this data, it's the best available science and most accurate math that probably we can put on the table. But of course, taking responsibility to deal and taking decisions based on this data, it's really important. And how you invest further. So not only measuring the scope 3, for example, data, but what to do with it. And therefore investing into the right, let's say, ways or the right funding to accelerate the development of the carbon reduction, and therefore probably, yes, removing the technology that will help us to become carbon negative much more faster. But just because I liked very much Ioana examples, and I'm also a personal believer on the fact that each, let's say, small step or each individual partnership will help, let's say, the sustainability bigger impact. I would like just to provide 2 beautiful examples that are very dear to my heart. First of all, I would like to provide the example of, let's say, local partnership between the Bucharest University and our, let's say, Microsoft site in Romania, that it's leveraging the power of AI technology to support, let's say, solve the critical environmental challenges within our own, let's say, Bucharest environment. And therefore, we have developed a project 2 years ago with Bucharest University to find the best way possible to improve the air we breathe in cities and in parks. And how we did this is to gather data from sensors that are placed all over the botanical garden in Bucharest and use AI to create complex algorithms to determine the impact on each various type of vegetation that might have on the oxygen level. It's a small step. However, these data sets are extracted and will impact the way eventually that the parks are going to be designed and the green areas in the cities, especially in Bucharest, that will also help develop these smart, let's say, strategies for the environment. And also another, let's say, example that it's very dear to my heart, it's this sustainability solution that we developed with a different startup, Security AI, it's called this time, that is, let's say, extracting AI data for the Earth to use some case run along with the local startup that I've mentioned, that is used for one of our most renowned, let's say, oil and gas players in Romania, that is showing how innovative the technology can be used to prevent the natural disasters such as oil spills. And this, let's say, algorithm that the AI is creating based on the data extraction with the help of the drones, they are video inspecting more than 5,000 kilometers of the existing existing oil pipelines in the countries. And Securify, this startup, has developed together with Microsoft a product that takes real images with the help of the drones, as I said, and analyze them automatically in the cloud in order to identify incidents in real time, any kind of alerts, and how these prevention, let's say, teams can react in timely matters, not only as is, but also proactively going forward. So those are just examples in this, let's say, small partnership that can help create a bigger impact.
Absolutely. And since we are talking about this, we have a question specifically for Microsoft. Do you think it will be possible to become zero waste by 2030 at Microsoft? How will you measure and how will you make sure that we are just not moving the waste problem somewhere else outside the company instead of solving it?
I think I've mentioned this several times. The question is not if, because we are very confident that we'll do it. It's a very dear target to ourselves. The question is how we will do this to become a zero waste target. So as I mentioned, in terms of measurements and in terms of transparency, this is a public data report that is available. I think I've already discussed this. And of course, for me, it's not a problem if, it's a problem how.
Thank you so much. I believe this gives an answer to our anonymous attendee. We have another two questions here. What solutions do you see for companies that want to switch to renewable energy in locations across the globe where renewable sources are not available yet?
Yeah, I can answer that. So, I mean, each country obviously has a very different energy mix. Some countries like France are nuclear based. Other countries, you know, Romania has a high coal and natural gas use. So it is of course difficult to guarantee a green or 100% renewable energy. I think what people can do in that case is actually have some on-site generation at their own locations, whether that's solar, wind, geothermal, for example. But of course, that comes with some added challenges around the logistics and costs. But again, I think to some of the points earlier, if we're going to try and get to carbon neutrality by 2050, it's businesses like us that are going to drive that innovation and drive governments to make better choices. So if there's a demand for cleaner energy in a particular country, then the government will be forced to listen, try and clean up its energy supply. And the groundwork for that has to start now. So we're not going to become carbon neutral in the next 5-10 years, of course not, but what we do in the next 10 years will help us on that path to 2050. So I think to summarise an answer to the question, it's either on-site generation, you know, or create that demand with the energy suppliers, and they will be forced into cleaning up their
to make it available.
Yeah.
Madalina, would you like to add something, or we can?
Sure.
Then we can jump to the next question.
Just quickly to mention, because we are facing this challenge in India, and looking at other companies, how they are dealing with this issue. Well, for example, they have started to look at developing own or generating on-site energy through a fuel cell. For example, one company has 100% of their data center electric demand just powered by fuel cell, which is without combustion. It's the process of electrolysis using gas, so it's not yet considered renewable. But that's something that we can look at, because at least it's not as polluting. It's 50% less CO2 emissions. Solar, again, own systems, rooftop buildings, solar thermal, domestic hot water supply, bioenergy, and even motion power for off-grid energy. So solar chillers. There are some options, but it's true in countries like India, where you have like a lot of fossil fuels there, and also a governmental policy not to move away very quickly from that, because that would mean jobs. What do you do with those people who are working in this industry? So they're a bit stuck in that mindset for the time being, but most probably things will be more and more, or they will be more and more open to renewables, because that's also a job generating market. And India is modern in that sense of they will look at what's happening in the world, and they like to compete also with other large powers. So yes, I think that we should not wait or stay at the, wait for the government to do something about it, but to push, and things will start to roll also in more difficult economies from that perspective.
Good. Well, the last question, and I think this is also we partly covered, but it would be good maybe to summarize. It's coming from Juliana Laurent. I hope I pronounced it well. Hi, would it be possible to quote top 5 or top 3 or top 5 company activities that are measured with highest carbon impact? Do you also have initiatives on how to raise awareness on practical activities back home? Thank you. So maybe you wanna, since you are already on the topic, you can.
So again, we need to look at, are we looking only at scope 1 and 2, or also at scope 3? Or do we look at it in terms of like a full CO2 emissions with this supply of CO2 generating sources, or only at what we do? Because for many companies, the most amount of CO2 will be in scope 3, also due to their business models and how they are separated and how they are working in a group type structure or with other partnerships. So if I won't think of scope 3 and think of own business operations for a shared service center, it's really the energy that we use. That's the most, the highest. Other things, we don't produce steel and we don't do agriculture, but the companies that do have that type of highest emitting sources. So yeah, maybe my colleagues can also add.
Yes, Richard or Madalina, if you want to continue also on this.
Yeah, I think it comes back to an earlier point about understanding your own business first of all. That's the first step for any business. But if you're looking for concrete initiatives that you can do that can reduce your consumption, Iona's right, it's around the energy you use on site. So if we take an example of scope 1 emissions, it's gas production on site that we use for our heating, for hot water and cooling. So an easy option there would be to have software that controls your heating systems to make sure that you're not wasting energy. So if you wanted to look into something called a building management system, for example, to control your heating would be one concrete example. If we think about scope 2 emissions, the electricity that we buy that is supplied to us, two easy options there. It would be to change to LED lighting, of course. I think everyone's aware of that. But also if you have a huge amount of telecommunications and PCs, you should look at PC power management to make sure that your PCs are switching off when they should be. And we often find that, yes, we want to empower people to make the right choices, but if you have software or technology that means that people don't have to make a decision to switch off the PC, switch off the light, turn the heating down, if technology can do that for you, it makes it a lot easier. And I think, you talk about awareness programs. So what we tend to do is, we will show people the energy consumption before a project. We will show them the energy consumption after the project, and we will translate that into how many trips from London to Paris or Singapore to Delhi, for example, and again, bring that element of fun into it. And I think that's really important.
Clear. Madalina, would you like to add something?
Just for the last couple of minutes of the conversation.
Yeah.
Not particularly much, because probably the whole theory stays the same, but historically, in the past, we have not focused in on our own direct emissions and electricity consumes. Now, of course, it's a big, let's say, attention point. But I would also like to point a bit the employees' travels that probably haven't been mentioned so far. And this is not as calculated as thoroughly as the emissions from our supply chain, but this is really also critical for us to be pointed to the employees. And I'm talking about, yes, air travel, but also company cars travel and so on, so every kind of travels as well. That will add a bit of different thoughts from my predecessor colleagues of the panels. And that's also important to be monitored as well. And bringing this fun part that Richard mentioned, that also will be enabling the employees to take the right choices in this.
For sure. And
thank you for highlighting that, Madalina. It's very important because it will be a challenge for us to reduce that travel that we used to do, because it was amazing. It won't be at that level, but we'll have to favor, talking about the partnerships and the discussions before, we'll have to favor those companies who are either already investing in alternative jet fuels or doing R&D there, so that they are more efficient and aware of the impact they are having, so that we can travel without that much impact. But until then, yes, we'll slow down as well.
But just trying to end a bit in a positive note, maybe this, let's say, lockdown period, it's a great lessons for all of us to look into the future. So probably we can turn this challenge into an opportunity and grab this opportunity while it's not too late for our plan. Because in the end of the day, yes, it was a hard and challenging time for all of us, but at least the planet stopped and breathed for a while. So
until we throw our masks.
Okay, let's look, let's say, proactively to the future, and I'm pretty sure that we will find alternatives for that as well.
For sure, this made it obvious that it is possible to achieve a lot of things without necessarily hopping on the plane or in the car. So I'm sure that this will be taken further. And yes, it would be ideal to have this fueling without environmental impact. But until then, I think there are other small stuff that we can do for sure, like switching to fully electric cars. Putting some filters back home and not use pets and so on. So it's like also the small stuff that can have a huge impact.
But as Richard mentioned, this is not a revolution. It lasts for decades. It's rather an evolution.
Exactly.
And as long as big, let's say, companies and each of us individuals, we are doing our part, we are playing our part of the game, I mean, we can only build for the future. Let's move along with the evolution, right, Richard?
Yes, keep our evolution.
Good. So we are almost, or actually a little bit over. I only have one question as a close-up. It's about how we do position ourselves as a country compared to the others, especially that all of us here in this panel, they have a broader view on how other countries are positioning when it comes to sustainability and impact.
I think I would defer to some of my colleagues in Romania to maybe answer that one.
Well, to me, Romania is part of the entire, let's say, ecosystem. And I'm talking as a representative of a multinational company. We are talking one Microsoft voice. And therefore, this kind of, let's say, alignment to the company culture and direction, it's really important. And I'm also talking as a native Romanians. Because in the end of the day, I am born and bred here in this country. And I care very much. I love my country. So being part of a global game, it helps me making an impact in my own country. So I would like to keep it in a positive note here.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Madalina, just to, Aura, if I can say, we've all had colleagues who are working internationally. We've all probably had moments when we were at the table with the representatives from other countries. They know their country's strength, or me from an intergovernmental perspective, I've been in situations in which I had to confront people who were like really from the highest powers in this world. So and who am I, a woman from Romania? No, it's not about that. I think that there is a great deal of character and competence in Romania. I think that we know how to go through challenges, because what else can take us down? Nothing else. We really have this opportunity, not opportunity, but we are in a situation where we can only grow, we can only innovate, we can only be sustainable because we've seen other aspects in our lives. So I think that now is the time for us to shine.
Absolutely. The maybe only one thing that I would add here, and this is also something that we can be proactive here, is how also to include and support authorities to fight this fight together with us, because yes, there is an impact that we have maybe through our actions, which are, if I can say, somehow a bit limited, but there is also a great deal out there that can make even more impact. And this is from small stuff, how we encourage the transitions towards renewable energy, towards how do we save I know our parks and forests and so on and so forth, and how we ultimately end up not using different kind of fossils and so on. So there is still a lot of work here to do, and it's also for us to drive these great initiatives together with the authorities. And I know that that's a point that we are still struggling, and also it's quite rather challenging, but on the other hand, we like challenges, so I'm not afraid that we will not push this. Good. So with this being said, unless dear panelists, if we have anything further to add, I think we can close the session. Thank you very much for a super good discussion, and very enlightening. I also found out about the great stuff that you are doing that I was not aware of, and I hope also our listeners enjoyed it and also found out great things about the actions that we are doing. Thank you very much, and also thank you ABSL for giving us the opportunity and also organizing this. I think it went quite smooth. So until next time, thank you, take care, and stay green.
Thanks everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.